Happy Friday, everybody. I am Jeremy Birmingham. That's Bill Landis. This is the Podcast Daily. It is February 24th. It is 2 weeks or so, maybe a little less, Billiam, to the start of Ohio State spring football. And as I mentioned, it's Friday. And since we have nothing else to talk about, it's another Freaky Friday mailbag edition, courtesy of the fine subscribers at ohiostate.rivals.com, where you and I think we got some good questions this week. I think it's a good mix of things to talk about on the field, off the field. And, I'll just, of course, address the elephant in the room. Austin's golfing. So it's just the two of us. And he's getting ready to celebrate his 40th birthday by doing it on the golf course. So when was the last time you played golf?
Oh boy. Probably in the summer of 2020. So it's been a minute.
So you and I are both on the same track, right? I haven't played since summer 2020. We talked about it last week as we were mocking Austin mercilessly for not inviting us on this trip, which is sort of weird because his explanation was, well, I didn't know if you would golf because you haven't golfed in 3 years. Maybe it's because our cohort doesn't invite us to golf that we don't golf.
That could be part of it. I know I haven't been working. I've only been working with Austin for half a year now, so I guess I can't blame him on my lack of golf playing. I would not play because I am not very good, and I'm very self-conscious about how bad I am at golf. So I don't want to go to a nice course with people who are good at golf and then stick out like a sore thumb because of how terrible I am, and then hold everyone up.
Yeah, I think in that instance, you just go, you have a good time. You make sure you repair your divots, and you just don't worry about it. You're not at Top Golf or something where people are recording you and putting it on the internet. You don't have to worry about that. And I think that at least makes it a little bit easier, a little bit less stressful, but whatever. It's fine. It's fine. What else are we going to talk about, Bill? I mean, I guess the reality is when I turned 40, I don't remember going to Pinehurst number 2 and celebrating there. I think I was working. I think Ohio State was playing Rutgers, and so I was probably like in New Jersey because that's what happens when your birthday is on October 1st. And it seems like every year Ohio State plays Rutgers on my birthday, which is like the weirdest thing that the gods have done to me ever.
Is it? Because they're just guaranteeing you a win on your birthday.
Yeah, but like I swear to you, it's been 4 of the last 5 years I played Rutgers on my birthday, and I don't know how it always works out that my birthday is on the Saturday because it seems like that should rotate, but it hasn't been rotating. And maybe I'm just making all this up. It doesn't matter. What does matter is that, as I said, we do have a lot of questions from folks on the message board at ohiostate.rivals.com, where you can join myself and Bill and Austin. You can use promo code DTE30 to sign up for a free month. We talk a little bit more in depth about things there, especially recruiting stuff, because that's what they're paying for. And the YouTubes are, we're getting there. We're gonna push ahead, try to find a way to involve more recruiting stuff as we get through and into spring football. But Bill, I'm gonna let you take the reins on the question, choosing, because I like your style. I like the way you do it. So why don't you dive in and see where we get started?
Yeah, let's we'll start with a football question. This question, Austin and I have talked about this a little bit. I don't know if we've gotten much of your input, Berm. Who will be the 4th receiver this year? And I guess we'll say that, like, who will be the number 4 guy in terms of like statistical output? Catches, receptions, touchdowns, that kind of stuff. If we are to assume that the top 3 are Marvin Harrison Jr., Emeka Egbuka, and Julian Fleming, who's number 4?
I think it's safe to assume that is the correct top 3. And I think with the return of Xavier Johnson, it's going to be him. I think his maturity, his versatility, the ability to step up and make plays in big moments, I think has given him the opportunity and the right to have that, be something that he has to lose. We'll see if Jaden Ballard with this spring can really take that next step. I think he has the physical tools to be the type of player that can stretch the field in a way Ohio State may not get from those other 3. But you have to be consistent. You have to be able to show up day in and day out for a guy like Brian Hartline, who's not at a point where, and this is not to knock anyone else, but the expectations of wide receiver at Ohio State right now are much different than they were even when Brian Hartline took over in 2018. And you better be able to do everything and do everything really well And Xavier Johnson has proven he can do it. So if he's coming back for a reason. So I would put him as that guy.
You are a big fan of Brandon Inniss. I
Yes,
also am a
love
big fan of
Brandon Inniss.
Brandon Inniss. I'm a big fan of Noah Rogers.
Yep.
What are the chances that it is a freshman in this incoming class that emerges as the fourth most productive receiver?
I mean, I think the chances are okay. I mean, we saw last year guys get injured in the first game of the season and things changed. And so you don't know with the history of Julian Fleming's had with injuries of maybe, if these guys open the door for some of these freshmen, because Bryson Rogers, Noah Rogers, and Carnell Tate are already on campus. And from what I understand from talking to people, they've all shown up with a ready to work attitude. There hasn't been any diva in any of them to this point, which I think is something you always worry about with the wide receiver group, especially considering some of the antics that people ascribed to the Carnell Tate recruitment and thinking that he'd maybe come in and be a little bit of a headache. But from what I understand from talking to people, that's not been the case at all. Inniss, I think, because he's not coming until the end of May, we'll have to catch up a little bit and learning the playbook. But he's a guy who I think you could actually find other roles for, like punt returner, because he can do a lot of things and he's extremely competitive and he's very reliable catching the ball. But that said, I mean, that question gets a lot easier to answer 6 weeks from now when we've had a chance to see if Keon Grays or Caleb Burton or Kojo Antwi or Caleb Brown really emerges when they have the opportunity this spring alongside Jaden Ballard. So, I mean, it's a huge spring in that room, and it's easy to sort of gloss over that room because Brian Hartline has so much talent there in the returning group with Marvin and Emeka, who are maybe the top two receivers in the country coming back, not just like on the Ohio State team, but maybe in the country. But it is a pretty pivotal spring for the rest of that group.
Yeah, my pick will be Xavier Johnson too. I think it can change, but he earned it last year. I don't want to overlook him with the way that he produced when he was put in the big spots by Ohio State last year, and he's got a different kind of skill set too, with a guy who can do stuff out of the backfield. Evan Pryor might have a say in that if he gets healthy and gets on the field, but I think it has to be Xavier now. But I'll leave the door open for a Brandon Inniss type or Keon Gray, someone like that, maybe to get some more of those slot snaps that Xavier Johnson got last year. Second part of that question, Berm, was whether or not we have a favorite. Well, I'm sure we do have a favorite. So what is your favorite college town?
That's a good question. I know it sounds stupid because people mock it all the time, but I actually really like when we take our trips to New Jersey. I mean, making fun of my birthday always ending up on Rutgers weekend, but I do like Piscataway. It's kind of just quiet and a little understated, which I'm a big fan of, but we don't often really get to spend our time on these road trips in the college town because not the way it works. I like Maryland. I like the multitude of options around there, the places to go. Penn State, we've only stayed in Happy Valley one time when I've been on the road, and that was 2020. So it was like, not really the same as normal because you can't stay in Happy Valley because the hotels are booked out so far in advance. It's not really. I mean, I really enjoyed Madison the one time we went there. I'm looking forward to doing that again, just because, and I'd like to get there a little bit earlier and see more of the surrounding area because it's visually appealing. But Columbus, Ohio, is my favorite because that's where I spend most of my time.
Columbus is actually a very good one that probably doesn't get talked about enough. Minneapolis is a good one, although that's like a major city. It's not really a college town. My favorite is State College, but I fully admit that it's a pain to get to, and you can't stay there for a football game if you're traveling in from out of town. So you don't get to really experience what it's like on a game day throughout the day, unless you're just, you get there at 6:00 in the morning for an 8:00 kick and you spend your whole day there in the parking lots. But it is a good college town. It's like a quintessential college town, I think.
Yeah.
Bloomington, Indiana is the same way. Madison, though, is probably my favorite. If you can get to Madison and spend some time there.
I'm a fan of Ann Arbor too. I just live 40 minutes away from there and I've been there enough, but I don't want to say that. I mean, it's a cool college town. I think that sometimes, and this is something Ohio State uses to its benefit on the recruiting trail a lot of times, is that Columbus is a college city, not a college town. And so it doesn't really get included in the same vein that it should. Columbus, Austin, Texas, those are college cities and it is a different vibe when you're in that sort of place than when you're in a college town where you drive for an hour and all of a sudden something pops up out of nowhere and you're like, oh, this is cool. And then you drive 10 minutes and it's gone. So I think Columbus doesn't get enough love for what it has become in the last 15 years or so. So I'm going to stick with my answer. C-Bus 614.
That's right. I really like this question. It was from username Buckeye Walk on the Dotting the I's message board. And we are in draft season, so this is timely. In the past 10 years, have there been any Ohio State players who have left early to go pro that you thought were making a huge mistake, but then things actually worked out pretty well for them?
I don't want to say a huge mistake because I fully understand the rationale for why Jerome Baker left early. But I think he's the guy that I would look at and say, man, if you could have got one more year out of Baker, things could have been a lot different, even just for everyone, Ohio State and him included. He could have moved up in the draft, and he's such a good athlete that you knew he would get an opportunity. He's played well for the Dolphins. He's been productive, but I think Jerome would probably be that guy for me. I understand why Malik Hooker left when he did, because he had such an incredible year in 2015 that you couldn't possibly stay. But he's another guy that I think if you look at his career, it's been fine, but could it have been better? I don't know. It's just one of those, you got to strike when the iron's hot. Baker left because he did not like what the defense was doing and where it was going and felt like he was not getting utilized enough. And so for that sake, it's hard to argue with his decision.
Yeah, he had a really good second year, and then his third year was a little bit of a dud. And when he left, you're like, I don't know if you're striking while the iron's hot, but he's an incredible athlete, and it's worked out well for him. I think he just signed a $40 million contract, so I think he's doing okay. He was one that I thought of, and then the other one was Noah Brown, who was he was mostly a one-game wonder for me as an Ohio State receiver with what he did in Oklahoma in the 2016 season. And then he just left after that year. And I was like, I don't know about that dude. And he was a 7th-round pick, but he's been pretty good. And he just had a really good year for the Cowboys.
Yeah.
I think it was a contract year for him. So I'd imagine if it's not with Dallas, it might be with somebody else. But I think he's going to get a nice deal here on what I think would be his 3rd contract. Because I think he signed a 1-year deal with Dallas to play this past season. So he's not been an uber productive NFL receiver, but for a 7th-round pick, I think he's done quite well for himself.
Yeah, you saw his name pop up a lot this past season for the Cowboys. So, I mean, it's one of those things where Noah, you didn't really know what he was at Ohio State. He wasn't one of the burners they had on the outside, and so you weren't sure if he was a guy they thought should they flex in a tight end type role or whatever. But he had that 4-touchdown game at Oklahoma, like you said, and I think he was like, hey, this is what I can do if you throw me the ball. But at the same time, that in the same vein as Jerome Baker saying, hey, I don't know exactly what's going on with the offense or the defense. Noah Brown's like, JT Barrett's the quarterback, and we've got all these running backs, and so what do you do? You wonder how different his career could have been if he played in 2018 with Dwayne or something like that. But that's a good choice too. That's solid choice.
I do not have an Ohio State answer for this question, but I'd imagine you might, Berm. The question is, if you can go back in time and change the result of one non-championship game for a team that you root for, what game do you choose to change? And the example given in this question was the 2019 Fiesta Bowl, against Clemson.
I mean, since it's a non-championship game, I would, if it was a championship game, I'd pick the Super Bowl for the Bengals last year against the Rams, where they were, had this Super Bowl stolen for them on a crappy holding call at the 2-yard line. But if I'm talking non-championship game, let's just go down the list. Ohio State, Georgia 2023, Ohio State, Clemson 2019, Ohio State, Michigan State 2015, Ohio State, Michigan State 1998. Pick one of those 4, and I'm content with it being the answer. I look at Ohio State in the last 25 years and think about how many times they should have won a national championship when they were the best team in the country. And didn't. And it's somewhat shocking if you go back to 1996 and really start evaluating that with the 13-9 loss to Michigan in that year when Sean Springs slipped, et cetera. But I'll eliminate the 2019 Clemson game from this list because I think they would have lost to LSU in the national championship anyway. Because as good as Ohio State was, and I think that would have been a much better matchup than what we saw with LSU and Clemson, I still think LSU would have won just because they were sort of untouchable at that moment. but probably the 2015 Michigan State, because that's a team, that Ohio State team was the most talented Ohio State team I've ever seen. And to lose to a backup quarterback at home 14-7, like, you got to be kidding me. Like, you got to be kidding me.
On senior day. Yeah.
Like, you got to be kidding me. That's probably the one that you're like, oh, how on earth did that happen? The other ones you can sort of understand.
Yeah, that is the one for me in my time covering Ohio State. I'm just like, I still can't wrap my mind around to this day how they lost that game and how they allowed themselves to be to come up short of being one of college football's dynasties if they would, because they would have won the national title that year
without question
if they got to the playoff again. Yeah. Mine, like I said, is I did not grow up an Ohio State fan. Mine is the Philadelphia Flyers. No, I guess that's the Stanley Cup game. I can't do that. Man,
was it a clinching game or not?
I don't know. Probably like one of the Eagles lost like 3 straight NFC championships when I was a kid. Pick any one of those probably. That the Flyers have had some brutal losses in championships, so I won't count those. But I would like to see them win a title before I die, which probably isn't going to happen. But yeah, the Eagles losing 3 straight NFC championships was pretty brutal for Bill Landis.
That's not great. It's not great for anyone. I will also add an Ohio State basketball game to this list in the 2011 Elite Eight against Kentucky, because that was the most fun Ohio State team I've ever experienced. And I, in not so many words, blamed that loss for my brother dying 5 hours later. So, like, even though there's no direct correlation, but like, that was the last conversation we had was about that game. So I figure, like, if Ohio State would have won that game, then he might have gone to bed and not, died in his sleep that night. So I don't know. That's the way it goes, I guess. We can launch that into because I was figuring, we read the questions ahead of time, and one of the questions here was about what led you to getting into the sports media business, and was it something you've always wanted to do, or is it just the way everything fell into place? That's from Dracket Tower. For me, my brother dying in 2011 is what, like, pushed me into trying to do this job. He died in March of 2011. I was living in Arizona. My then wife, like, was not very into sports at all. I didn't really have a lot of outlets to conversate about sports. My brother was the person I talked to all the time about everything sports related. When he died, I decided I was going to just start writing a blog, which I did. I wrote one blog like 4 months later, and Jason Priestis from 11 Warriors read it and asked me to write for their website, which I started to do like almost immediately. And that's how it happened. I was not planning on anything like being in this business for a career. So my brother was a brilliant writer, and one of the biggest Ohio State fans I've ever known, which is, you can't see it on my wall, but I have one of his license plates on my wall back here. It says Bucks #1 fan on his license plate, because that it was everything to him. So when he died, I was like, I'm going to just try to honor him by writing and trying my hand at that. I've never been very good at writing exactly, but I'm getting better. But that's how I ended up getting into this business. It was pure, I don't want to say luck, because again, the impetus was certainly not lucky, but the opportunity to get read quickly by Jason at 11 Warriors, and to get involved with that site right when Urban Meyer was getting hired, sort of just took off from there. So that's how.
Did your brother make a living as a writer?
No, he should have. I mean, he could have. He was just not someone who ever took chances like that. So he was a brilliant writer, however, and just had an incredible way with words. He used to like read the dictionary as a nerd, but he was super bright, and the internet really didn't take off at a time where he felt like he could have. Like, it was obviously taking off when he was writing. He was on Ohio State message boards all the time. And, people like Ramsey Nasrallah from 11 Warriors knew my brother on a message board. So it's just like little weird connections like that. So he definitely should have been writing. Like, when the internet really popped off in 2004, 2005, he should have been writing somewhere, but there was just no way to really make a living doing it at the time. So he worked for the federal government instead, which, whatever. I guess that's a good way to make a living.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fair. It's perfectly respectable way to make a living.
Yeah.
I was going to be a teacher, and then I liked writing. Um, Started writing for the school paper at Penn State. Decided I really liked it, and then the goal for me pretty quickly became to become a college football writer. And funnily enough, like I wasn't one at Penn State. I was never on the football beat at the paper at Penn State. I became an editor kind of instead of doing that. So I didn't really get that opportunity to cover college football full time until I got the job at Cleveland.com in 2014. But it was something like as soon as I decided I was going to be a journalism major, get into the business, and like the goal became major college football writer. I never really envisioned that it would bring me to Columbus, Ohio to cover Ohio State, but I'm really glad that it did because I don't think there's anything bigger you can cover in the sport than Ohio State. So I feel very fortunate in that way. But the path to get into the business was rather mundane, I suppose. I just kind of worked for the paper and decided that I liked it. But I guess I achieved what was legitimately like a pretty big life goal of mine when I got put on the Ohio State beat, to the point that when I got it, I cried, like legitimately cried, because I was so like taken aback by it.
But you
yeah,
were
it's been
covering
really
high
cool.
school football in like Eastern PA and New Jersey. Now you were getting great pizza, which we discussed last
That's
week.
true.
But
Yeah.
you know, I started really, I loved recruiting growing up. So Bobby, again, my brother, like he was such a weirdo about Ohio State football that like he had a subscription back to Buckeye Sports Bulletin back in like 1988, 87, 88, 89, but that didn't get delivered until Tuesday. And he would just buy it every Monday instead. So he'd always have 2 copies of it because he would still buy one when he's on a lunch break on Mondays, because that's when it was in the newsstands in downtown Toledo. So I would always just take his second copy. And they back then they would do like profiles on one recruit every month basically. But I still remember very vividly like getting into recruiting because of Buckeye Sports Bulletin. And then when I was playing high school sports, I felt like I didn't really get a lot of help from my coaching staff and stuff as far as getting recruited. So when I found myself getting the opportunity to write at 11 Warriors, and I was like, hey, I'm really interested in writing about recruiting because that is where my passion is. And I really wanted to marry the idea that there are a lot of young athletes out there that need people to help give them some spotlight and give them some shine. So that was something I really wanted to do. And like I said, then it just sort of took off and got fortunate. And I owe everything. I mean, as far as getting into the business, it started because of that, but staying in the business and becoming like someone that people give a crap about or want to listen to, I almost owe that entirely to the class of 2014 at Ohio State. That group was so good to me and trusted me with so many stories and like so many breaking news things that like it totally changed the arc of what I was doing. So I guess that's the long way to answer that question, but it is something that I know it's fascinating to people, and like, oh, how'd you get into that? Because recruiting is such a bizarre niche, thing, but it's fun.
That was like Raekwon McMillan and like Curtis Samuel and those guys.
Yeah, McMillan. I mean, Demetrius Knox, Stephen Collier. I mean, all those guys. I owe so much to Sam Hubbard. Like, I owe so much to that group of guys because they really Terry McLaurin, et cetera. Like they trusted me with so much of what they were going through, and I was at that time extremely unestablished and new in the space. But it was really awesome to have that opportunity, and I got lucky. I think really because, as I said, Urban Meyer was just getting hired at Ohio State. And when you're leaving behind the Jim Tressel era and the internet era is combining at the same time, Mark Pantoni was ahead of the curve as far as like following recruiting media on social media and that kind of stuff, and paying attention to that. And so once I think people started to realize that like this guy is at Ohio State and he's changing the way everyone handles and covers recruiting, I was fortunate to get to know some people early and worked out.
How about we segue that into a recruiting question?
Love it.
From D-Bone Malone, our guy.
D-Bone!
Have you noticed any have you noticed any changes this year in Ohio State scholarship offers, specifically when they are offering and who they are offering?
I mean, the only real difference is that I think you obviously see Ohio State being more aggressive inside of the state of Ohio. We saw in January 3 offensive linemen offered that maybe in traditional years past they would have waited until June to have them on campus and get them into camp to see if they wanted to go down that road. But because of NIL, because of the fact that you need to replace essentially, you probably need to sign 6 offensive linemen in this class. You can take a couple of those chances. We saw on Thursday morning Tony Alford offering a Florida running back commitment. And you think, hey, they have offers out in Ohio to Sam Williams-Dixon and Jordan Marshall, and they're really high on the board with James Peoples. So why would you offer someone else? Why not just focus on those relationships? In the past, I think Ohio State coaches would have probably just said, hey, let's focus on these relationships, Alfred specifically. But I think he's feeling like, hey, what happened with Mark Fletcher, what happened in 2020 with Jalen Knighton and Bijan Robinson. I think that like at some point you touch that stove a few too many times and you realize you can't be left holding the bag while someone else steals it, essentially. So I think that you're starting to see some changes there, but generally speaking, it's in Ohio where the biggest adjustment is coming, and that is a direct correlation to, or directly correlating to NIL. And the fact is, and it made some people, I think, nervous earlier this week in one of the stories on OhioState.Rivals.com, where I said that the battle for like Bryce West and Aaron Scott is not going to be cut and dried. It's not going to be an easy recruitment for Ohio State. I still think both those players will end up choosing Ohio State, but for any top 100 type player around the country, like the game has changed. If you have that sort of profile, NIL is now going to be a part of your decision. And Ohio State will not be able to just waltz into those living rooms and say, hey, come to Columbus and we'll figure out NIL later. Like they're going to have plans in place. And I don't think people want to hear that because they heard Mark Pantoni on signing day talking about the different approach. And then you hear that and you're like, okay, so you're changing your approach, but you're still struggling in the state. Like that's not the case for everyone. But when you're talking top 100 players, that's going to be the way it goes.
When I heard that, people did seem alarmed by what Mark said when we talked to him. I didn't take that as they weren't going to go after any of that kind of player, but they were going to have to be more strategic and selective about it because I just don't think they're built yet to kind of go into all those living rooms and just promise exorbitant amounts of money, because you have to be able to deliver on it too. And I don't think Ohio State wants to put itself in a position where it's over promising and under delivering with those kind of players.
And I also think that they've realized that maybe the best way to be aggressive in the NIL front is in the transfer portal, because if you look at the recruitments of Davison Igbinosun or Jahad Carter, like those are players that have established themselves in college football. And if you're running a business, which is now college football has always been a business, but now you're talking in the micro sense in the NIL world, like now you have to ask yourself, is it worth spending money on a guy that hasn't proven he can play in college football, or is it worth spending money on a guy who has 2 years left and has proven he can play? Like which way would you go? And so I think there's some interesting calculations that have to be made in that space. But Ohio State has said over and over they want to continue to build through the traditional high school prep recruiting ranks, and I don't think they're going to change a whole lot of what they do, but they are definitely not going to waste their time on kids that they know are focused only on NIL.
Let's do one more question, shall we?
Sure. I mean, I could talk all day. I'm like Captain America, Bill. I can do this all day. Just keep firing them away.
This question is from Paulie Dio.
Paulie!
If you could have one superpower, what would it be and why?
Did you pick that because I said I'm like Captain America?
Nope. It just was random and it happened to work out.
Natural segue. You start, because I'm interested in hearing your answer and your justification for it.
Flight. I'm terrified of airplanes. If I never had to get on one again, that would be tremendous.
And I imagine flying by yourself in the air is more comfortable than an airplane seat.
Yeah, especially for someone who's my size. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, flight is always sort of the one that I think makes the most sense. I've often pondered this question. I'm a superhero nerd. I do like nerdy things like that. I think invisibility is creepy, so I'm not going to say that one. But then at the same time, like the telekinesis and the ability to read minds is also sort of like being invisible. And I think that that's also creepy. But I mean, super strength would be cool. Super speed would be I think I'd probably pick like super speed over flight, because I still don't want to fly. So I'd rather just be able to run somewhere really fast and get there in no time, like the Flash or someone like that. So I don't know. I mean, Spider-Man's always been my favorite superhero, but I don't know that I'd really want to be the guy that climbs on walls. because
Yeah.
that's all, or like shoots webbing out of my hands. Like that'd be freaking weird. Like, and it's not, I don't know if we're talking just your traditional, powers like flight, invisibility, strength, etc., or like the mutations, but who knows? It's
Yeah,
also
I think
weird that people make this big deal that Marvel in the MCU, Bill, hasn't introduced mutants yet, but Spider-Man essentially is a mutant. It was a mutation of a spider, but they keep saying like, oh, they haven't invented, talked about mutants yet, but they have, because Spider-Man is a mutant.
yeah, I think you can make the case that quite a few of the people that they've introduced are mutants. But I guess they haven't like brought the X-Men into the equation in this new MCU, right?
Yeah,
So
I mean,
I guess I get
they're
that.
working towards that, but
Yeah.
it's annoying. Like Spider-Man is a mutant. It's a mutated spider. Like,
Yeah.
so. Wait, I mean, are you a Marvel guy? I know Austin is. You and I've never really talked about that stuff.
Um, I like them. I'm like way far behind on all the stuff that's come out. Like there are some of the franchises that I've seen none of the movies of. Like I've seen all the Avengers movies. I've seen most of like the early stage MCU stuff, like the Iron Mans and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But like I've never seen like a Doctor Strange. I've never seen an Ant-Man movie. There's if there, I've probably seen like I don't know 50% of the stuff, and I've seen the big important ones, but um I'm just so far behind to the point where now it feels overwhelming to try to get caught up.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's why you just have to do it my way. And as soon as the movie comes out, run to the theater the very same day, and you just don't waste time. You just don't let it happen. You
Did you
don't let
see the new
yourself.
Ant-Man movie?
Yeah, I saw it last Thursday. It was entertaining. I mean, it is what it is. I think there is this belief that in the like every story needs to be fully fleshed out, and that's just not the case when you're telling a story that's 20 chapters. There's going to be times when things don't feel like they are connecting, or like, I thought it was entertaining. It felt fine to me. I know that there was some negative reviews about it, and there's
Mhm.
negative reviews about everything. So
That's
I
right.
guess you just have to deal with that. Let me see. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I liked it. I've enjoyed it. It's fun just because like my wife doesn't want to watch those movies, but she will go just to like be like, I know you want to go see this, and she really
That's
enjoyed
nice.
like that. She really enjoyed like Doctor Strange and stuff like that. So she's actually started to like it a lot more in the second half of the MCU, because the first ones were just sort of meh, like Thor: The Dark World. Ooh, gross.
Yeah. I like Ragnarok. Ragnarok's a favorite of the ones that I've seen.
Yeah, Ragnarok was great, but Love and Thunder was like meh, So it's like, because
Yep.
they have the maybe best villain of any Marvel movie, and then just don't really put him on screen, and it's like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Christian Bale like
That's a
killed that
weird
role.
decision to have Christian
Yeah,
Bale and not put him in the movie. Yeah.
he like killed the role and was awesome and terrifying, and he's barely in the movie, but yet they have Rockman narrating all the time. It's just like you're
I
trying
like
a little
Korg.
too hard. Yeah, but he's fine. But like, he can't be like the primary storyteller. Like, it's, I don't know. Like,
Yeah, that's true.
what are you trying to accomplish? I would have been
That's
much
a fair
happier to
question.
see that movie from the vantage point of Gore, the God Butcher, which is a great name.
It's a pretty great name.
Whatever. I don't know. That's
All
Freaky
right.
Friday, Bill. We could do this. As I said, I could do this a lot, but I know people get weary of hearing me talk. Except because you like to sit there and be calm while I'm like, woo, 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 like freaking out all the time. But what do you got going on this weekend? Anything before we return here and reconvene for Monday's podcast daily?
My brother, one of my brothers is coming out to meet the baby for the first time. Got that
Huh?
going on.
Well, that leads
Um,
us to one of our other questions, Bill. Someone in it said, who was it? The OSU fan was an update on George Landis from Billiam. Please and thank you. How's he doing? Is he walking yet? Driver's license?
he's not walking yet. He is rapidly growing out of all the 0 to 3 month year old clothes that we have for him, and he's not yet 2 months old. He is 12 pounds now. He's 2 feet long or tall. I guess for babies you say long.
It's so weird that we only say long
Yeah.
for babies. Why don't we? I mean, can't we? I know that they lay on their back mostly, but can't we just stand them up? Or are you not getting a true like assessment because they're probably standing on their tippy toes? Cheaters. Babies are such cheaters.
Yeah, they are cheaters. We don't talk about enough about how babies are cheaters. He's good. He's doing great. He sleeps, he eats, he poops. That's all he does. It's a great life.
Were you stunned at how hard it is to be a parent, or were you shocked that it's actually easier than people make it out to be because it's so natural when it kicks in?
Um, I am. I was surprised to the extent of to which he just like figures stuff out on the fly. It's not. It's not easy by any means, but you freak out about a lot of things like leading up to it. Like, am I going to be terrible at this? And then it just sort of happens, and you figure stuff out, and it's okay. So, um, but yeah, it's not easy. My wife has it much more difficult than I do, though, because she has to feed the kid, and I don't have to do that. So,
Yeah. And like, I think the nice thing is that with babies, like they're going to like you pretty much either way. As long as they know you're there and trying, that they're not going to be like, there's no scorekeeping yet. That doesn't happen until they're like 5. And then they start holding everything against you and keeping score and seeing who loves them more. But whatever.
yeah. Well,
Anyway,
I'm nervous about when he starts moving around, how tall he's going to be and his ability to like reach counters and stuff.
how
Just
long he'll
because,
be.
yeah, how long he'll be. Yeah.
Have you started baby proofing yet? Like, have you had to
No,
soften
because he's not.
corners?
Yeah, no, not yet, because he's not moving around yet. But I think if he's going to be big enough to like reach our kitchen counter, like as soon as he starts walking, then we'll probably have to do some of that earlier than I thought we would.
Yeah, I would just say don't do it all at once. Start it now while he's not walking around, because that way it's going to be totally overwhelming when he tries to stick a fork in an outlet at some point.
Yeah, let's hope that doesn't happen.
Eventually you got to just start plugging those up now. But anyway,
Yeah.
we'll talk.
Have you ever
more
told
about
you the
this.
story about how I almost electrocuted myself?
No, I'd like to
We
hear
had
it,
we got in our first apartment we lived in here in Columbus when my wife moved here. We lived in the short north, and we got a washer and dryer installed, and I guess like the power cord we got for the dryer was wrong, so we had to buy a new one. And I bought the new one, and a guy from Sears was coming to install it for me, because that's not a thing you should do, I guess, unless you're like an electrician who knows what he's doing, or I guess if you're just like a more functional male than I am.
Yeah.
But I got the power cord, and I was like, oh, I want to make sure this is the right one. Let me see if it fits in the socket. So it wasn't grounded, attached to anything, and I plugged it into the socket, and it exploded in my hand because it wasn't grounded. And then the guy from Sears came, and I told him what happened, and he like stopped, and he looked at me, and he goes, "You're alive?" I was like, "Yeah, still here, baby. I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't be, but here I am."
That's the benefit of being big for no reason. You can handle that. I think it's one of those things that they don't tell you when you grow up, that like washing machines and dryers have different plugs based on your house. Like, why does every house not have the same plug? It's so weird. Home ownership is one of the worst things in adulthood. I mean, I'm glad that I get to mow the lawn. I enjoy that. But like, other than that, pretty much everything about owning a house is waiting for something to break and going, oh, do we have enough money to repair that right now? Nope. Great. But meanwhile, while you're saving money to fix the one thing that just broke, you're waiting for the next thing to break, because that's all it is. It's all about something breaking over and over and over. Like, I can't, especially because we have a well. We don't have like city water. We have well water. Like, we've had to replace like the drill, like the freaking drill to the well, like the whatever it's called. I'm not a functioning adult man either. You know what I'm talking about, though. It's like there's constantly something going on, and it's madness. There's constant breakage.
Yeah, we live in a 100-year-old house, so I've put a lot of money into this house.
Yeah,
because it was built in 1900.
Yikes! So ours was built in like 1962, and we're the second owner. So like everything in the house was like rigged up by this guy that lived here in a way that was designed to like skirt local ordinance, but to like make sure that things were working. So like our electric is terrible. We're constantly trying to like whenever we're trying to upgrade something, because again, I'm not like handy guy. So my wife's father is very handy, and her brother-in-law is very handy. So they'll come over and they'll help, and they're like, how did this happen? Why was this built this way? How was it put in place? How does this been working? Like, they're like constantly amazed that our house is actually still standing up. So other than that, it's been going great. Well, going great. But
guy had a system. You have to respect it.
Yeah, I mean, everything is rigged in a way that you're like, oh, okay, he did this so that he wouldn't have to report it to the city. It's pretty amazing. But anyway.
I love that.
Anyway, that's the end of this show. We appreciate you watching, and if you stuck it out this far, thank you. You win $1. If you haven't, you lose $1. So you can send it to Billiam, so he can buy ever lengthening George some diapers. Yeah. All right. We'll be back Monday with the podcast daily. We'll have a Roosters show, and we are 1 day closer to the start of spring football at Ohio State. Cannot wait for March 7th to get here. Until then, thanks for watching. Again, we'll see you back here on the podcast and at ohiostate.rivals.com, where you can sign up using promo code DTE30 to get a free month and talk to us there. See ya.